and welcome to Doing Disasters Differently, the podcast with Renae Hanvin, which is all about inspiring you to start thinking and doing disasters a little bit differently too. In this episode, I'm talking with David Parsons, crisis management expert and volunteer advisor and delivery partner for Resilient Ready. And we're talking about safeguarding livelihoods and services after disasters. Now, a little bit about David. David is a founding partner of Response and Recovery Aotearoa in New Zealand, which provides emergency management leadership training throughout New Zealand on behalf of the National Emergency Management Agency. David is an adjunct lecturer at the Australian Graduate School of Policing and Security Studies at Charles Sturt University. David's company, Crisis Management Australia, provides a range of emergency management advice to jurisdictions across Australia, New Zealand, the Pacific, and Europe. David previously regulated the New South Wales mining industry for emergency preparedness and managed Sydney Water's emergency management and counter-terrorism programs. He served as a member of the Australian Critical Infrastructure Advisory Council for 14 years. He's a volunteer member of Resilient Ready Advisories Committee, and he works as a delivery partner on projects, including council disaster event reviews. Now, I like to start with where we met. I was introduced to David by Claire Sullivan, who's an active disaster expert in policy and governance. Claire knew I was looking for people to join my volunteer advisory committee for Resilient Ready, and she said, "I've got the perfect person for you." So Claire got the okay from David for me to reach out, and in the first 5 minutes, he said to me, "Claire tells me you are doing something special and I need to be part of it. Tell me more." 10 minutes later, he agreed to join my volunteer advisory committee alongside Daniel Aldrich, Kate Carnell, and Anne Massey. How lucky am I? He's been so supportive since, not just on giving me many suggestions, but also being part of the delivery team, which means we've got to work together on projects, including a review we recently did for the South Gippsland Council in Victoria. I can't wait to chat with David and share some of his learnings with you all. David, thanks so much for joining me today. David, thank you for joining me today.
G'day, Renae. Thanks for having me on your program.
A pleasure. Now, let's start with, David, as a volunteer member of my advisory committee, you've been part of the C2C journey, which is now Resilient Ready. What do you think is the most important part of what, through Resilient Ready, we are aiming to achieve?
The principal goal is to help Australian businesses be businesses that, when there is a disaster, pull through, thrive and prosper from that disaster moving forward. And to do that, we need to build mindsets and capabilities and ways of thinking and tools that help people do that. We know a lot about the disasters, and we know a lot about what makes businesses more successful during and post-disaster. So it really is about building capability, building strengths that help people keep on going and keep on thriving.
And I've been so grateful to have you on the advisory committee, because obviously you're an emergency management and a crisis management expert. And I think there's not a lot of people in the sector, I think, who gets businesses as that stakeholder group that is important. And I guess, why do you think now's the right time to build resilience and readiness in all types of businesses? Because when we use the term business, we mean micro and small businesses and large and medium-sized corporates, but also not-for-profits and government entities of businesses. So why do you think now's the right time to build resilience and readiness in all types of businesses so we can safeguard livelihoods and services?
Look, for the last decade now, we've heard more and more the term VUCA, which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and the last one, which is ambiguity, being talked about. And the world of high turbulence, because of a whole range of factors. We've seen the turbulence from the pandemic, which has still got a long way to go before it comes history, from severe weather events, whether it be big bushfires 2019-20, major flood events across eastern Australia just in the last couple of years. The whole supply chain issue with the global shipping crisis we're currently seeing with the disruption of supplies coming out of places like China, and the whole geopolitical risk that's sitting in the South China Sea. So what we just see is just back-to-back events where the ability to forecast effectively even weeks ahead is so hard because of the turbulence. And there's no sign that's going to ease up so what we just have to be saying to ourselves is we're living in a cycle in the history where uncertainty is the norm. And therefore, the way you get through those periods of uncertainty is being a resilient business who's ready for whatever is thrown at us. And who knows what 3 months or 6 months holds. So I think that's our challenge. Just saying to ourselves, yes, we're in turbulent times. It's not going away. There's lots of uncertainty. So let's be ready for it. Let's make it good for us.
And can you just, sorry, you said an acronym right at the start, but I didn't quite get, can you just repeat what that is?
Yeah, it's actually a military term. It's used a lot these days, which is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and finally, ambiguity. And it's really just saying that our ability to forecast forward is so poor because the amount of turbulence happening through the whole of society, whether it be supply chains, power supplies, natural resources, the weather, it just goes on and on. So really, no one really knows what the world will be like in even 12 months' time without worrying about it in 2 years' time. So in these high turbulent times, it's about having the skill sets that help people survive turbulence. And that's those skill sets around forecasting and readiness, all the things that that are embedded in the programs that you run, Renae.
And I think too, I guess, for me, what's really starting to transition and the word livelihood. So I presented on the Gold Coast a couple of weeks ago where we actually launched Resilient Ready. And I heard the term used by others and I talked about it because whilst the room was, there was a lot of council people and state government and community people, but unless you have a, huge trust fund from your family, then you have to earn a livelihood. So you earn a livelihood by working for a business, again, whether that's a for-profit, a not-for-profit or a government entity. So if we don't have businesses that can thrive through disasters, then we lose livelihoods. And that has, I guess, direct and indirect consequences of unemployment and mental health for people, who've, like myself, who've put their heart and soul into setting up businesses and, that then alludes into homelessness and domestic violence, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. So I think having those, and, if not-for-profits can't operate, then they are already servicing those most vulnerable in the communities and that capacity to serve them stops too. So you're having a double effect of, I guess, negative impact in communities. Now, you and I often talk about how in Canada, they put the same focus to getting businesses back up and running as quickly as possible following a disaster, like in Australia we do when it comes to getting kids back at school. Now, do you think it's time Australia follows Canada's lead and puts a greater focus on prioritising businesses reopening?
Yeah, the example coming here is the Calgary floods a few years ago now. They had a 1 in 200 year flood event, so it's quite a large flood event, flooded many, many hundreds of homes, many, many hundreds of workplaces. And there was a conscious decision taken by the leadership team in that flood event to A, help people get back in their homes, but B, to help people get back into their businesses. And it was a very big flood event. And what was interesting, the studies showed that because of the support given to small to medium scale businesses that were on the floodplain, they had a very small loss of businesses. In fact, the majority of the businesses reopened, and that was because they were given support throughout. They were given support to clean the business out. They were given support to get organised. So, of course, the big oil companies there were very impressed with this because in the supply chain, those small businesses supply medium-scale businesses who then supply the big corporates there. And they realised that keeping the small businesses going was just as critical for the big businesses too. So it was recognised that the leadership team in the floods in Calgary were held up as an example of how to get it right. That to recognise that a community is people living in homes. There's also people going to work, producing products and services, supporting other businesses, and seeing that as an integrated network, as an integrated group of entities, of homes and business, etc., meant that the community as a whole were able to recover from those floods in an effective way and to keep going. And this is important. So I think there's a challenge for us that we see getting people's homes back in their homes as important. But one of the challenges is if people go back to a home that's actually been flooded, they've got a lot of costs ahead of them. So if they haven't got a job because we didn't help the business restart, we've let everyone down. And I think we need to think a bit more in a more holistic way about how all that works, and see it as an integrated system of helping not just one aspect of the community, but all aspects get back on their feet.
100%. And I think too, again, we've recently gone through a rebrand from corporate to community to Resilient Ready. And, yourself and Anne Massey and Kate Carnell and Daniel Aldrich have provided such great advisory support for this transition. But it comes because there's a need, because I get asked to consult and, provide advice on various, government strategies, etc. And I remember one that was only about 3 months ago, and it was the process of a person going through, a bushfire kind of impact and recovery scenario. And I listened and I was like, well, that's great. That's very interesting. But where's the part where they go to work or open up their shop? And the response was, oh, no, we're not looking at that. And I think there's a long way to go that hopefully we can drive that change around. You have to include people's livelihoods, because, again, if that business doesn't open, whether they own it or whether they work in it, there is no livelihood coming into that community and into that person's rent payments or food, or, so it's a big problem. And I think we talk a lot about, obviously 97% of businesses are small businesses. So when we talk businesses, we're not talking about the big profit making, commercials. They obviously exist, but, 97%. And if a small business has been impacted, if they're not up and running within 5 days, they are gone within 2 years. So the statistics are very clear in telling us globally that we need to be doing more to help keep businesses in business. And I think government of all the stakeholders needs to better understand the vital need to build the capabilities, because otherwise they're going to be on unemployment or, insurance, etc. So
because what we see, Renae, is that has both a physical and mental health impact. And those are high costs for the community. So they're often hidden costs, because they don't really tend to segregate those out and see those as cost of the disaster. They're the ongoing costs within the community.
Yeah,
and this can be quite a big cost. So if we actually see that whole ecosystem of family, home, business, work, that whole ecosystem needs to be supported to become a functioning ecosystem, a healthy ecosystem again.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully we're talking to some academics and whatnot around potentially looking into some research around that, because I think it's fundamental. And again, it's just not even on the radar, which it has to be. Now, working in crisis management, what do you see that best gets communities ahead of future disasters?
There's some well-researched and documented things here. First of all, networks. People are well networked. They know who to talk to get information, to get support. Those networks share information about threats and hazards and about solutions. So for small businesses, this can be belonging to the local Chamber of Commerce, going to breakfast functions with other members of the business community, getting their networks in place. What we know is that, again, to be crisis ready means you're proactive and you're forward leaning. So they're proactive in terms of identifying developing threats, identifying developing hazards, whether it be a cyclone season, a flood season, a bushfire period. There's indicators of increasing risk. It doesn't just suddenly happen. So they're practically seeing those increasing risks, and therefore they're able to take proactive actions to be ready for that risk when it actually comes. So that whole thing about being forward leaning, that just means that we're taking readiness actions. We don't wait till we get hit by the hazard. We're actually ready for it when it actually comes. We also see that in those communities that they have leaders, and it's not usually just one leader, it's a band of leaders from all parts of the community who, when something happens, band together quickly or interconnect with each other to provide this stronger leadership capability. It's a bit of a myth that there's this one person leads, but what you usually find is there's this network of people who, in their part of the community, in their demographic, in their social structures or in their business area, step up and provide that central hub of guidance to others. And one of our tricks in any communities is knowing who those are. They're the influencers, and getting those influencers connected to make a more powerful, if you like, or a more energised group of leaders who can lift that whole community and drive it forward. And that's a challenge, and certainly for most of Australian communities, there's a local emergency management officer or there's a local disaster planning person. I can go to Townsville, I can go to Rockhampton, I can go to Blue Mountains, I can go to Moe. They all have these people, and they should be connected to all of these network leaders too. So these sort of things make a big difference.
And I think, Daniel Aldrich's work is very much in this space around connected communities are more resilient than affluent communities, which always sticks with me. So you don't need to have money to have connections. And I think too, David, as you know, we've recently published a white paper alongside Business BM as one of the projects that we're delivering in the Blue Mountains, where we did some research into the business community and what they thought about networks. And it was quite interesting. I'm going to say there's an area of opportunity which we are activating in the sense that they don't really understand why businesses should network or what the benefits are or even how to network. I guess there's that, old school, oh no, they're the competition, I'm not going to network with them. But at the end of the day, in this current era of, various disasters that you alluded to before as well, there is so much benefit in connecting with the businesses next door and the same type of business around the corner, because you might need to work together on your supply chains, or you might be able to work together to, get procurements from councils or governments that you couldn't do by your own. So I think that business community networks is a really key part of community resilience and definitely helps in that recovery process as well.
And what's interesting, if you look at results from Kellogg University on the difference between middle managers and senior executives in large corporations, one of the differences is the senior executives see their networks as a critical business tool. And there's a whole pot of attributes they see in those networks. One is they see them as an intelligence source. They find out things through those networks. They see those networks as a peer support network. They've got people they can contact to get ideas, to get solutions. They see that network as a very valuable tool set. And if you think about people who want to change things around the society, they'll start to gather people around them with similar ideas. They start to build a actual momentum of a group, which is more influential than an actual individual. So these networks are highly valuable, and for a whole range of reasons.
Now, I was going to ask you what role businesses play in resilience and recovery, but I think we've kind of already covered that a little bit in the conversations that we've had. So as you know...
Oh, but Renae, no, I have to jump in there.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, okay, please.
So that, look, obviously, if we've already talked about those businesses provide employment, provides physical and mental health benefits. There's no doubt about that. They also know their community. The local taxi driver knows the people when they get out of their house once a week to go shopping, or once a fortnight, who are housebound any other time. If you talk to the local chemist, they know the people who don't go and see doctors. So in our community, those business owners know a lot about those people that are their regular customers, and that's valuable knowledge in our recovery process. It helps us to know who we might need to provide assistance to. It helps us to know, what's the true nature of the community that we're actually serving. And a lot of that knowledge is embedded in those individual business owners. If it's a local vet, whatever it might actually be, they've got so much knowledge about that community, different segments and sectors of that community.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you. And thank you for acknowledging that and stopping me and including that, because I agree. And I think, the chemists, the hairdressers, you shouldn't go into a community and not work with and learn from the people in that community. I mean, there's the seagull kind of call sign that I guess is everywhere at the moment about coming into a community and telling them how to do. And I think too, it's important to recognize that business people are often wearing multiple hats. So they might be the captain of the local fire brigade or in the SES. I know a lot of my team at Resilient Ready, and, they have community service roles as well. And I also know of, small businesses in little communities that were impacted by the bushfires and the business almost went under because the owner of that business was actually out fighting fires for not just his community, but the one down the road as well. So businesses as an entity, but also business people, they just play such a big role in communities, in the resilience and the recovery process as well. Now, as you know, we are actively delivering projects in Australian communities through Resilient Ready that have been communities that have been impacted by various and multiple disasters. We have a micro-learning format, which are all about helping business people understand, anticipate, and reduce negative risks in a 5-minute format. So again, really short snippets. So David, you're an expert in the risk space and you've written multiple handbooks, etc. So how can people in business, and remember, businesses include not-for-profits and government entities, how can they better anticipate their risks?
Yeah, look, there's a couple. First of all, it's about knowing the hazards in the area in which you operate. If I operated in a large bushfire area, knowing which direction the fires come from. We know, for example, in terms of fires, we know when the high-risk part of the day is, we know when the most property losses occur. All that knowledge is out there. So it's really about either searching about it or talking to people who can actually tell you that. Secondly, it's about being environmentally aware of the developing threats. So this is everything from looking at the weather forecast for the next few days on a phone app, looking at the fire weather index, for example, and that again can be done on an app. All the states and territories have quite good apps with their fire services, etc., and Weather Zone and the Weather Bureau all have information. So looking at what are the hazards. And that includes understanding what your supply chain is. So the next time that the delivery driver delivers that big box of product for you, just ask them, where does this come from? Where do you pick it up from? Or do you know where it actually goes to before you pick it up? Are there multiple courier centres it gets to get to that person? Try and understand how that product and services get to you. What are the vulnerable points in that actual supply chain? And ask and talk to people. So whether you're in a area that's got a fire service or it's got an SES service because it's got cyclones or floods, they like being asked, can you come and talk to us? So if I belong to a Chamber of Commerce in my local community, I'd be asking those people to come and explain, how does this work and how do you prioritise things? And do you think about business? You need to engage and talk to people. So I think understanding your risks is really taking the time to ask questions, doing a little bit of research, learning from the past. I in my own local government area where I live, I choose to look on a history site on a website, and I've learned so much about hazards just from that, seeing past big fire events and past big snow events and all the other things that have happened. If you don't have time to do that, get people in to talk and ask questions. And if you've got that actual network, whether it be a small community where only there's 20 businesses or 15 businesses, again, even if it's just a breakfast function where the SES or the fire service come and talk to you for 25 minutes or 30 minutes, there's lots to be learned that makes you more able to see a developing risk, but more able to understand what's happening around you. And if you can understand what's happening around you, you're much better able to make decisions and choices that benefit your own business.
That's right. So I think if you understand the hazards and understand the risks, then you can look at how you can reduce or mitigate those negative risks, but also there could be some positive risks that bring big opportunities to your business as well. Now, my final question is always the same. So what would be the two, and I know before you were like, can I make it 20? But no, what would be the two things you'd like to be done differently in the disaster space?
In some parts of Australia, we unfortunately see the local disaster or local emergency management planning groups who plan for disasters not representing their communities properly. That is, not having business reps and all sorts of reps on those committees. It might often just be the hazard agencies which look at hazards, which doesn't really give you a good representation of the community's interests and needs. So there's some good areas where it's done very, very well. I would like to see that more of Australia, where the disaster planning committees at a local government level, and all the states and territories have that, actually represent their communities and community interests and needs. And that's one big thing. And in that, I'm including businesses and how decisions made impact businesses. So I live in a tourism area where about a third of our employment occurs through tourism. So any decision in a fire event, for example, affects the jobs of a third of our community. So that's critical. That's one thing. Second thing is we need to communicate more clearly and easily to people about what's happening with hazards and threats. So we're seeing this is improving dramatically. So if in most states and territories, the fire service apps now show fires, show what's happening with the fire. That's got very good compared to 15 years ago. And we're now seeing that same developments occurring where in floods, for example, we're learning to communicate better to people about what's going to happen, how things are going to unfold, because then people can make decisions and choices. So if we're not communicating well to the community about a hazard, we can't expect them to make the right choice to take readiness actions. And I think in Australia we're now getting that, and we're certainly seeing better communication, more understandable communication. I think it's still a long way to go, but at least we've started.
Yeah,
and that then gives the community power because they understand they can make a decision.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been, I guess, an evolution in that conversation lens or the balance of conversations. And dare I say it, I think the compounding multiple disasters that are hitting some communities from all levels of resulting in the fact that, you know, communities are best served to understand and know what they need. So there needs to be a wider conversation with them and listen to them as well. Now, a big thank you to David Parsons from Crisis. He's a crisis management expert and also, very lucky for me, a volunteer advisor and delivery partner at Resilient Ready. And we've been talking about safeguarding livelihoods and services after disasters. David, thanks so much for joining me.
Renae, it's great to talk with you again, and wishing everyone the best in this current world of lots of risk and lots of uncertainty. We can't let our guard down, that's for sure.
Hear, hear. Thanks so much, David. I hope today's episode of Doing Disasters Differently, the podcast, has inspired you to think a little bit differently about the role you can play before, during, and after disasters. Given the new era of more frequent and compounding disasters that we are now in, let's work together to build an all-hazards disaster resilient future for all. Find out more about the work I'm leading as a social enterprise building disaster resilience at resilientready.org. Don't forget to subscribe to Doing Disasters Differently, the podcast, through your preferred platform. And we'll see you next time when we discover new ways of doing disasters differently together.